The grand cathedral bells echoed through London as thousands gathered outside Westminster Abbey, inside the ancient walls. Prince William stood quietly in his private chamber, adjusting his ceremonial robes one final time. The weight of history pressed upon his shoulders as he prepared for the most significant moment of his life, his coronation as King of England. Catherine, now Queen Consort, entered the room with their 3 children. Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis looked magnificent in their formal attire, though Louis fidgeted nervously with his small ceremonial sword. The family shared a quiet moment together before the ceremony that would change their lives forever. "Papa, are you scared?" Charlotte whispered, reaching for her father's hand. William knelt down to her level, his eyes soft with emotion. "A little, sweetheart. But knowing you're all here with me makes me feel brave," he replied, pulling his children close for one last family embrace before stepping into his role as monarch. The procession began with the sound of trumpets filling the air. As William walked down the aisle of Westminster Abbey, he saw faces of world leaders, family members, and dignitaries from around the globe. The Archbishop of Canterbury stood waiting at the altar, holding the St. Edward's crown that had crowned monarchs for centuries. But as William approached the altar, his eyes searched the crowd for one particular face. In the front row sat an elderly woman in a wheelchair, her silver hair carefully styled and a gentle smile on her weathered face. This was Margaret Thompson, his childhood nanny who had cared for him during his most difficult years after his mother's death. Margaret had been like a grandmother to William, staying up with him during nightmares, teaching him about kindness and compassion, and helping him navigate the complexities of royal life while still allowing him to be a normal child. She had retired years ago to a quiet cottage in the countryside. Many assumed she would be too frail to attend such a grand ceremony. The ceremony proceeded with ancient traditions and sacred vows. William placed his hand on the Bible and promised to serve his people with honor and dedication. The crown was lifted high above his head, and in that moment, the entire world held its breath. As the golden crown was placed upon his head, making him officially King William V, his eyes found Margaret's once more. What happened next surprised everyone in attendance and millions watching around the world. Instead of maintaining the stoic composure expected of a newly crowned king, William's eyes filled with tears. But these weren't tears of overwhelming pressure or fear. They were tears of gratitude and love for the woman who had helped shape him into the man he had become. The cameras captured every emotion on his face as he looked at Margaret. She pressed her hand to her heart, tears streaming down her cheeks. In that sacred moment, surrounded by the pomp and ceremony of centuries-old traditions, the human connection between a king and the woman who had been his anchor during childhood created a scene that would be remembered forever. The Archbishop continued with the ceremony, but those who knew William well could see that his focus had shifted. This wasn't just about becoming king anymore. It was about honoring all the people who had helped him reach this moment, especially the humble woman who had given him unconditional love when he needed it most. As the final prayers were said and the congregation sang "God Save the King" for the first time in his honor, William's emotional response had already begun touching hearts around the world. Social media exploded with comments about the new king's humanity and the beautiful relationship between him and his former nanny. The ceremony concluded, but the real story was just beginning. What William had planned as a surprise for Margaret would soon unfold, creating a moment of such pure emotion that it would reduce millions of viewers to tears and remind the world that even kings are human beings with hearts full of love and gratitude. After the ceremony concluded, the royal family proceeded to the traditional balcony appearance at Buckingham Palace. Thousands of people filled them all, waving flags and cheering for their new king. William stood with Catherine and their children, waving to the crowd below. But his mind kept returning to Margaret in the wheelchair inside the abbey. During his childhood, Margaret had been more than just a nanny. She had been his confidant, his comfort during thunderstorms, and his guide. Through the difficult period following Princess Diana's death, when a tear-old William would wake up crying from nightmares about losing his mother, it was Margaret who would sit by his bedside, reading him stories until he fell back asleep. She had taught him valuable lessons about treating everyone with respect, regardless of their position in life. A true gentleman, she would tell young William, is measured not by his title, but by how he treats those who can do nothing for him. These words had shaped his character and his approach to royal duties throughout his adult life. Now, as king, William V, he wanted to honor the woman who had given him so much during his formative years. Earlier that week, he had personally called Margaret's daughter Sarah to arrange something special. "I want to do something for your mother that shows her how much she means to me," he had told Sarah over the phone. The plan was simple but deeply meaningful. After the public celebrations, William had arranged for Margaret to be brought to a private reception at Buckingham Palace. But this wouldn't be just any ordinary meeting. He had prepared something that would acknowledge her role in his life, in a way that would surprise everyone, including Margaret herself. As the afternoon progressed, palace staff quietly wheeled Margaret through the grand corridors she remembered from decades ago when she had worked there. The familiar portraits on the walls brought back memories of chasing young William and Harry through these same hallways, trying to keep up with their boundless energy. Sarah walked beside her mother's wheelchair, both women amazed by the grandeur surrounding them. Margaret had worked in the private quarters of the palace, but had rarely seen the staterooms in all their ceremonial glory. The golden decorations, crystal chandeliers, and priceless artworks created an atmosphere of majesty that took their breath away. "I can't believe William remembered me," Margaret whispered to her daughter. "There were so many important people at the ceremony today. I thought perhaps he might just wave from a distance." Sarah smiled knowingly, aware that her mother was about to experience something far more significant than a simple wave. Meanwhile, William was in his private study, having changed from his heavy coronation robes into a more comfortable suit. He held a small wooden box in his hands. Inside was something precious that he had kept safe for over 20 years. It was a simple locket that Margaret had given him on his 10th birthday, containing a photo of his mother and a small note that read, "Remember, you are loved." Catherine entered the study and found her husband staring thoughtfully out the window. "Are you ready for this?" she asked gently, placing a supportive hand on his shoulder. William nodded, still holding the box. "Deserves to know how much she meant to me, how much she still means to me." The moment was approaching when William would reunite with Margaret, but not as the young prince she had once cared for. Now he would face her as king, ready to express gratitude that had been building in his heart for decades. The surprise he had planned would not only honor Margaret but would also reveal to the world the kind of man their new king truly was. Someone who never forgot kindness and always remembered those who had shaped his character. Palace staff made final preparations for the reunion, setting up a private sitting room where William and Margaret could speak without the pressure of cameras or crowds. This would be an intimate moment between two people whose bond had transcended the boundaries of royal protocol and social class, proving that genuine human connections can last a lifetime. The private sitting room at Buckingham Palace had been carefully prepared for this special reunion. Soft afternoon light filtered through the tall windows, casting a warm glow over the elegant furniture. Fresh flowers, Margaret's favorites, white roses and baby's breath filled crystal vases around the room. William had remembered every detail about the woman who had been such an important part of his childhood. When the doors opened and Margaret was wheeled into the room, she gasped softly at the sight before her. William stood waiting, no longer wearing his crown or ceremonial robes, but dressed simply in a navy suit. The intimidating figure of the newly crowned king had been replaced by the familiar warmth of the boy she had once tucked into bed each night. "Your Majesty," Margaret began formally, attempting to bow her head despite being seated in her wheelchair. But William quickly crossed the room and knelt beside her chair, taking her frail hands in his strong ones. "No, Margaret," he said gently, his voice thick with emotion. "Today, I'm still your William." The elderly woman's eyes filled with tears as she looked into the face of the man who had once been the grieving little boy she had comforted. I watched you today," she whispered. "I was so proud. Your mother would have been so proud too." At the mention of Princess Diana, both William and Margaret shared a moment of quiet understanding. They had both loved her and mourned her loss together. "Margaret, there's something I need to tell you," William began, still kneeling beside her chair. "After my mother died, I was lost. I was angry, confused and scared. But you never gave up on me. You showed me that even in the darkest times, there was still love and kindness in the world. You taught me how to be a good person before I could ever learn how to be a good king. Sarah, Margaret's daughter, stood quietly in the corner of the room, tears streaming down her face as she watched this tender reunion unfold. She had grown up hearing stories about Prince William and Harry, knowing how much her mother cared for them. But seeing this level of gratitude and love expressed so openly was overwhelming. William reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the small wooden box he had been carrying. "Do you remember this?" he asked, opening it to reveal the locket Margaret had given him 20 years ago. Margaret's hand flew to her mouth in surprise. She had assumed he would have forgotten about such a simple gift long ago. "I've carried this with me through everything," William continued. "Through university, through my military service, through my wedding day, and even today during my coronation. It reminded me of your words that I am loved, and it helped me remember the man you taught me to be when the pressures of royal life became overwhelming." Margaret reached out with trembling fingers to touch the locket, memories flooding back. Of that young prince who had needed so much comfort and guidance. "You kept it all these years?" she asked in disbelief. William nodded, his own eyes now bright with unshed tears. "But that's not all," William said, standing up and walking to a nearby table where a larger box waited. "Margaret, you gave me something invaluable when I was young. You gave me stability, love, and the foundation of who I am today. Now, I want to give you something in return." He opened the larger box to reveal a beautiful crystal globe with an engraved base. Inside the globe was a miniature replica of the Rose Garden at Kensington Palace, where Margaret used to take young William and Harry to play. The engraving read, "To Margaret Thompson, the woman who taught a prince how to be human. With eternal gratitude and love, William." But the real surprise was still to come. William had arranged something even more meaningful than gifts or kind words. He had invited someone special to join them, someone Margaret hadn't seen in years, but thought about every day. The door to the sitting room opened quietly. Margaret's eyes widened in complete shock at who walked through it. The reunion was about to become even more emotional as William's surprise reached its crescendo, proving that the new king's heart was as generous as the woman who had helped shape it. Through the doorway walked Prince Harry, Margaret's other beloved charge, whom she hadn't seen in person for nearly 3 years due to family tensions and his move to America. Margaret's hands flew to her heart as she saw the young man she had also raised, now approaching with tears already flowing down his cheeks. "Harry," Margaret whispered in disbelief. The years of separation melted away instantly as Harry crossed. The room had knelt beside William next to Margaret's wheelchair. Despite all the public disputes between the brothers, they had both agreed that Margaret deserved this moment. She had been a mother figure to both of them when they needed it most. "Hello, Nanny Margaret," Harry said softly, using the affectionate name he had called her as a child. "I've missed you so much." Margaret reached out to touch both young men's faces, unable to believe that her boys were together again, and that they had arranged this reunion for her. William had secretly contacted Harry weeks before the coronation, putting aside their differences to plan this surprise. "Whatever issues we have with each other," William had told his brother over a private phone call, "Margaret loves us both. She deserves to see us together one more time." Harry had immediately agreed to fly to London, keeping his visit completely secret from the media. "You two did this for me?" Margaret asked, looking back and forth between the brothers. Both men nodded, and for a moment, they looked exactly like the young princes she remembered, mischievous, loving, and inseparable. The pain of recent years seemed to fade as they focused on honoring the woman who had given them both so much. Margaret began to share memories that brought laughter through the tears. She reminded them of the time 5-year-old Harry had tried to hide a frog in William's bed, only to have it escape and cause chaos throughout the palace. She recalled William's attempts to teach Harry proper table manners, which usually ended with food fights instead of royal etiquette. "Do you remember the secret tea parties?" Margaret asked with a smile. Both brothers' faces lit up as they recalled the special times when Margaret would sneak them into the kitchen after their official duties were done. The palace chef would prepare tiny sandwiches and cakes, while Margaret taught them that the most important conversations happened not in formal dining rooms, but around simple kitchen tables. Harry pulled out his phone and showed Margaret recent photos of his children, Archie and Lilibet. "I tell them stories about you," he said quietly. "About how you taught us that family isn't just about titles and bloodlines. It's about the people who love you unconditionally." Margaret studied the photos with joy, seeing echoes of the little boys she had raised in their children's faces. William shared his own photos of George, Charlotte, and Louis, explaining how he had tried to pass on Margaret's lessons to his own children. "Charlotte has your stubborn streak," he told Margaret with a laugh. "She refuses to go to bed without hearing the same story you used to tell me about the brave little prince who learned that real courage comes from kindness." The afternoon continued with more shared memories and gentle laughter. Sarah, who had been quietly observing from across the room, was amazed at how her elderly mother seemed to grow younger and more vibrant. With each story and each moment of connection with the princes she had helped raise, as the golden afternoon light began to fade, Margaret looked at both young men seriously. "I need you to know something," she said, her voice steady despite her emotions. "Your mother would be so proud of both of you, not because you're a king and a prince, but because you've both become good men who care about others." Act. She wanted most. The brothers exchanged a meaningful look, and in that moment, some of the tension that had existed between them seemed to ease. Margaret had always been able to see past their arguments to the love underneath. Her words reminded them of what truly mattered, but William had one final surprise prepared. Something that would not only honor Margaret, but would also show the world the kind of king he intended to be. The most touching moment of the day was yet to come, and it would leave everyone present understanding the true measure of their new monarch's character. As the evening approached, William stood up and straightened his jacket, his expression becoming more formal, yet filled with warmth. "Margaret, there's one more thing I need to do," he said, his voice carrying a weight of ceremony. "And I want Harry here as witness to this moment." Palace staff quietly entered the room, bringing with them an ornate wooden case bearing the royal seal. Margaret looked puzzled as William opened the case to reveal official documents adorned with golden seals and ribbons. "Margaret Thompson," William began, his voice now carrying the authority of the crown. "You have served this family with dedication, love, and unwavering loyalty for over 30 years. Harry moved to stand beside his brother, both men presenting a united front as they honored the woman who had shaped their characters. William continued, "Today, as my first official act as king, I want to bestow upon you an honor that reflects not just my gratitude, but the gratitude of our entire family and nation." Margaret's eyes widened as William lifted an elegant medal from the case. The honor was the Royal Victorian Order, one of the most prestigious awards the monarch can personally bestow, typically reserved for those who have provided exceptional service to the royal family. But this particular medal was special. William had commissioned it to be engraved with a personal message. "This medal represents more than recognition of service," William explained as he carefully pinned it to Margaret's dress. "It represents the love of two boys who grew up to be men, largely because of your guidance." The engraving reads, "To our second mother, with endless love and gratitude, William and Harry." Margaret's hands trembled as she touched the medal, completely overwhelmed by the magnitude of this gesture. Never in her wildest dreams had she imagined that her years of caring for these children would be recognized in such an official and meaningful way. She had simply done what felt natural, loved them when they needed it most. Harry stepped forward and knelt beside Margaret once again. "We wanted to make sure the whole world knows how important you are," he said softly. "Not just to us, but to everyone who understands what it means to love children unconditionally." Sarah, who had been watching from across the room, was openly sobbing at the beauty of this moment. Her mother had worked quietly and humbly her entire life, never seeking recognition or praise. To see her honored by the King of England in such a personal and meaningful way was beyond anything the family could have imagined. William wasn't finished yet. "Margaret, I know you've retired to your cottage in the countryside, and I respect your desire for privacy and peace. but I want you to know that there will always be a place for you here. Your room in the staff quarters has been maintained exactly as you left it, and you're welcome to visit whenever you'd like." The elderly woman looked up at both princes through her tears. "You boys have given me the greatest gift anyone could ask for," she whispered. "You've grown into men who remember kindness and who value the people who loved you. That's worth more than any medal or honor." As if sensing that their private time was drawing to a close, Margaret reached out and took both William and Harry's hands in hers. "Promise me something," she said seriously. "Promise me that you'll remember what your mother taught you about love being stronger than duty, and what I tried to teach you about treating everyone with respect. The world needs leaders who remember their human beings first." Both brothers nodded solemnly, understanding that they were receiving final words of wisdom from the woman who had helped raise them. "We promise," William said, speaking for both of them. "And we promise that our children will know about you, about the woman who taught their father and uncle how to love." The reunion was drawing to a close, but the impact of this moment would ripple far beyond the walls of Buckingham Palace. What had begun as a private gesture of gratitude was about to become public knowledge, and the world would soon learn about the kind of man their new king truly was, as palace photographers were quietly invited to capture this historic moment. For posterity, none of them could have predicted how profoundly these images would touch hearts around the globe, proving that true nobility comes not from birth or title, but from remembering and honoring those who shape our hearts. The following morning, newspapers around the world featured the photographs from Margaret's reunion with William and Harry. The images showed the newly crowned king kneeling beside his former nanny's wheelchair, both princes together honoring the woman who had helped raise them, Margaret proudly wearing her Royal Victorian Order medal. The public response was overwhelming and immediate. Social media platforms were flooded with comments from people who were moved to tears by the king's gesture. "This is the kind of leader we need," wrote one person. "Someone who remembers where he came from and honors those who shaped him," another. Comment read, "In a world of superficial celebrity, here's a king who shows us what real class looks like." News stations picked up the story, interviewing child development experts who praised William's public acknowledgement of Margaret's role in his upbringing. "This sends a powerful message about the importance of caregivers and the lasting impact they have on children's lives," explained one child psychologist. "By honoring Margaret so publicly, King William is showing that he understands leadership begins with gratitude and humility." Margaret, back in her cottage in the countryside, found herself receiving hundreds of letters from people around the world. Families wrote to thank her for showing them the importance of loving caregivers. Teachers and nannies shared how her story had inspired them in their own work with children. Parents expressed gratitude for the example she had set in raising children with both privilege and humility. One letter particularly touched Margaret's heart. It came from a young woman named Emma who worked as a nanny for a wealthy family. "Dear Mrs. Thompson," the letter read, "seeing how King William honored you has changed how I view my job. I used to think I was just helping with childcare, but now I understand that I'm helping to shape future leaders. Thank you for showing me that love and guidance matter more than anything else we can give a child." The story had an unexpected impact on William and Harry's relationship as well. The brothers, who had been estranged for several years due to various family conflicts, found that their shared love for Margaret had reminded them of their deeper bond. They began speaking regularly again, their conversations often returning to the lessons Margaret taught them about forgiveness and family. Harry decided to extend his stay in London for several more days, spending time with his brother's children, and allowing Margaret to meet her grandchildren Archie and Lilibet via video calls. The healing that began in that palace sitting room continued to grow, showing that sometimes it takes looking backward to move forward. William incorporated Margaret's lessons into his early speeches as king. During his first address to Parliament, he spoke about the importance of remembering those who serve others quietly and without recognition. "A nation is only as strong as the love we show to one another," he said. "And sometimes that love comes from the most unexpected places, from the hands that comfort us when we're afraid, from the voices that read us bedtime stories, from the hearts that see potential in us even when we can't see it ourselves." 6 months later, William established the Margaret Thompson Foundation. It's dedicated to supporting caregivers, nannies, and child development workers throughout the Commonwealth. The foundation provided education, resources, and recognition for people who dedicate their lives to nurturing children. Margaret, despite her age, agreed to serve as the honorary chairwoman at the foundation's launch ceremony. Margaret spoke publicly for the first time about her years with the royal family. "Love doesn't recognize titles or social status," she said, her voice still strong despite her advanced age. "When you love a child, any child, you're helping to build the future. Every parent, teacher, and caregiver has the power to shape tomorrow's leaders simply by showing up with kindness and consistency." The ceremony ended with William and Harry presenting Margaret with a crystal sculpture. It's depicting two young princes holding hands with an older woman in a garden, a permanent reminder of the bonds that transcend time and circumstance. Years would pass, but the story of King William's Coronation Day surprise continued to be shared whenever people talked about authentic leadership and the importance of gratitude. Margaret Thompson became a symbol of the quiet heroes who shape history not through grand gestures, but through daily acts of love and dedication. The touching reunion had accomplished something remarkable. It had shown the world that they're new. King understood that true strength comes from acknowledging our debts to others, and that the greatest leaders are those who never forget the people who helped them become who they are. In honoring Margaret, William had honored all the caregivers, teachers, and unsung heroes who shape lives with love, proving that a king's crown is only as valuable as the heart that wears it.